Hey y'all, welcome to another Compliance Capers, the first one for our lovely April showers month. So, Sonal and I are coming to you to discuss some new stuff this month. So, hey Sonal.
Hey, Betty. How are you, my friend? Happy Friday, our first Friday in April. Can you believe it?
Yes, you're getting
Wow.
past the April Fools.
I know. We're getting past April Fools. Exactly right. Exactly right. So yeah, we're looking forward to whatever this month has in store for us. Because I know you definitely picked a exciting yet particularly scary topic for us to talk about this entire month on self-disclosures. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for the audience to get their fear factor on.
Mm.
Ironically, in the month of April rather than October for Halloween and stuff. But yeah, it's definitely going to be hopefully a really interesting conversation and highlights that I know you're going to be providing throughout the month. So I'm super excited. Super excited for
Cool.
this month of Compliance Capers with you. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we finished out our wonderful February, or sorry, March. Geez, I'm missing months here. Our March Madness when we talked about the OIG work plan projects that Sonal had picked out for us to do. So I thought it would be a good idea to maybe move into something different that we don't hear talked about a lot, and that's the self-disclosures. So, what happens when you are taking a look around at your stuff and, somebody comes and everybody's like, uh-oh, and we find that, we have a little problem, and it's a problem to where it's raising to a magnitude that, you should be looking at things and probably paying some money back for just a honest mistake that was made, no fraudulent intent. And to make sure that you don't get accused of that or you don't have further problems, you need to take specific steps, and that's where the self-disclosures come into play, right? So I went and kind of searched around a little bit when we were looking for what self-disclosures we wanted to talk about this month. And so I picked a couple, and when you go to the OIG website and you look at the self-disclosures, you'll notice that when you click on them, and I'll have you a link for one that we're going to discuss a little bit today, there's not really a lot in them. Like when we were looking at the work plan projects last month, those are just pages and pages and gives you a whole lot of background information on what they were looking for. And well, in this case, the government's not looking for anything. You're like talent on yourself. You're, you're
That's
saying,
right.
hey, I found something. So when you look at the self-disclosures, there's really not a lot of information in them. Usually they're about a paragraph long because it's just like, hey, these guys fessed up, they found something and they want to come clean,
Yeah.
and so we're just saying this happened. That's it. So on some of the things, when Sonal and I are discussing them, we can't really give heavy particulars because we don't know. We can say what the matter was about. And so I tried to pick ones that were good from kind of like a practice perspective that we can talk about, like, so this is what they did wrong, or this is what they found, and this is what you can look at in y'all's practice, to make sure that the same thing's not happening. So these aren't going to be real heavy in the deets, as I don't know if the kids say that anymore or not,
I
but
think they do.
you always feel so old when you do something that you hear, like
Totally.
the lingo the kids are
Are you
using.
kidding?
And
Yes, there's so much slang. I'm like, what? I don't know what the new terminology is. Yeah, I have to ask a
or
lot of
you say
questions.
something and they're like, yeah, that was like, 2 years ago that people were saying that, or that's like
Yes,
last year. And
like last
I'm like,
year.
so I don't really try to do that too often, because I'm like, every time I do, it's like something that was like, no, no, nobody says that anymore.
Nobody says that anymore.
So,
Yeah.
but so the first thing is I wanted to show, and here is a link for the OIG self-disclosure protocols. So it is, and y'all know I love my paper. It's
That's
like,
right.
let's see,
Pretty
this way,
paper.
right? It's
Yep.
like a
Perfect.
15-page document that goes through, what to do if you find yourself in this predicament of having it. And as always, Sonal and I recommend, if you do find that you think this is something you have to do and you don't have in-house counsel, get a healthcare attorney, for this, because, you have to fill out some submission forms and they're online. So you want to make sure that what you're doing is, going to be proper and not, putting yourselves in some kind of other, jeopardy or light for something
Exactly.
else, that you want to get everything done right. But when you look at that document, it has all of the benefits of disclosure, and I think that's interesting. If they give a background about it, if you go to the first page and look at it, and they talk about how the OIG, set up these protocols in the Federal Register back in 1998. It says,
That's
for
right.
people to voluntarily identify, disclose, and resolve instances of potential fraud involving the federal healthcare programs as described in the Social Security Act, 42 USC 13020 A through 7B, blah, blah, blah. It starts going on into all the alphabet soup for the stuff. And then, they talk about the guidance for it and why they're important to self-disclose, and it says, first of all, it's because you have a legal and ethical duty to do so
Mhm.
once you found these mistakes. And that kind of goes back to that one OIG work plan we had talked about last month when they said, well, yeah, as soon as we found out we weren't supposed to do it, we stopped. Well,
Right.
yes, but you knew you had been doing it, so it's like things like that. So if you find these, you've got to fess up before somebody else picks it up on you, right? But I thought the benefits of self-disclosure, they laid it out real nice on page 2 with, they list 4 benefits that they give for voluntarily self-disclosing. And so I don't know, do you have, you probably have that, do you have the
Yes,
self-disclosure report pulled up? So
I
what do
do,
you
of
think
course, on my
about,
PDF. It's
what do
it's
you, I
great,
know you're all digital, my friend.
it's nice. They try and, on that second page, they try and cushion the blow of doing these self-disclosures with some niceties, right? So when I read those 4 particular points, like you were saying, it's supposed to be a two-way street of niceness, right? The good faith disclosure of potential fraud and cooperation, right, with the OIG review. So I thought that's really great. And they also continue on. Their second point is a big one because it comes to the nickels and dimes of it all, right? They are stating that they're going to be paying you on a lower multiplier on single damages. So that multiplier is going to be 1.5 times the single damages. So I thought that was a particularly interesting point because it could be a lot higher, right? It could be up to 3 times or more. It's at their discretion. Um, but in the black and white document here, these 15 pages, they specifically state that if you are doing this through a good faith manner and coming forth in the SDP, they are going to quantify everything with just 1.5 times. So that is considerably less, right? So, again, these are serious matters. And I know you and I have spoken about this in compliance capers again and again um, for the various OIG documents and works that we've been talking about since we started compliance capers back in January, that it really is serious if you do identify something that's not just a simple error, but it is going to be a considerable violation. You could be going against and triggering the False Claims Act, the anti-kickback statute. If all of these things you are thinking about disclosing in good faith, we always advise that these particular processes with the SDP are complex, right? They have an online form with, I don't know, like 20 or more things that you have to type in. You have to really get your ducks in a row and know what's required of you. And yes, they provide you with instructions, but it's highly advisable that you retain a experienced healthcare attorney to also talk through, is this going to be your best approach, right? Is this the best approach for you? Is this actually what you're going to do, right? The healthcare attorneys are there to help identify, well, yes, you are going to, in fact, be triggering one of these federal regulations, these statutes, et cetera. And then they and their team can help you then start identifying and quantifying, what the potential overpayments are. So this particular document of 15 pages goes through all of that as well. You can't just disclose that you found just these few items, right? You're going to have to quantify a lot more, and the steps are laid out throughout the document. But again, that's why when you decided that we would be talking about this for the entire month of April, this is very, very serious, right? So it's really important that our audience take a look first at the background links and things that we're going to be providing, so you understand what the nuts and bolts of this self-disclosure protocol, this SDP, actually are, because it's not just a simple, 2-page outline. It is literally
Right.
15 pages that are buried with so many fine details that you as a provider might overlook, but that attorney, that trusted, reputable, experienced healthcare attorney understands that minutia that you might just glance over and think this doesn't mean anything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you brought up a really good point too. So this is not like if you, are self-auditing, or you have an outside auditor come in and look at some of your records, and you find you did a couple that were maybe overcoded a level, or maybe this is not, you don't go
This
and
is not for that.
self-disclose something like
No.
that. They're talking about something
Nope.
bigger. I
Right.
think the one thing I wish they would have done in the SDP, the self-disclosure protocol, was not call everything fraud. I think
Yeah.
that might be off-putting to some
Yeah.
people, because like when
Yeah.
you look at
Yeah.
these things,
Yeah.
it'll say, when where we recognize whether to disclose potential fraud is a
Yeah.
significant decision. However, there's benefits to disclosing potential fraud. They keep throwing the
They
fraud, and
keep.
our practices, they hear that word and it's like, oh my God. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
for people that are looking to self-disclose, I usually try to, just kind of change the term to abuse.
Yeah.
Don't think of fraud. You're not
Yeah.
trying to commit fraud here. That's just the language that they use. And so they're
Right.
consistent with that language. And that's why most of the time they call it potential fraud, because they know you're fessing up.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not like busting yourself out for them to come and close your practice down or anything like that.
Yeah.
The other thing with the benefits, and which is under that section B on page 2, is the third one, where they talk about the timing there. So,
Mm-hmm.
keep that, in mind when you're doing these things or thinking about doing these things, that it's important to quickly get that healthcare attorney and to get things together.
Yes.
Because, it says that the payments have to be reported and returned by the latter of the date that is 60 days after the date on which the overpayment was identified, or the date any corresponding cost report is due, if applicable.
Yes.
So for
If
hospital systems,
hospitals.
so there, because you do have hospitals that are self-reported too. In fact, one of the things we're going to do later in the month, we're talking about a big system. So keep those dates in mind. Once, just like anything else, if it's a government regulation and they've got dates attached to it, don't miss deadline dates. Just don't do it.
Please,
It's not good.
please.
So because if you do, you can be subject to civil monetary penalties and things like that. So, I
Yes.
mean, I know you're self-disclosing, and if it's like a day over, they're not going to know anyway because you found it yourself, but you want to make sure you're keeping along with what's
Right.
required of you.
Exactly.
So it gives those nice little points out. The report then further goes on to talk about who can use the SDP protocols,
Mhm.
and they said, it's anybody that's subject to
Anybody.
the civil monetary penalty authorities
Mhm.
in the federal regs. So it's not
Yep.
limited to any particular industry, medical specialty, or type of service. And they give some
Great.
examples of a pharmaceutical or medical device manufacturer because they found that they violated the anti-kickback statute by accident.
Yep.
And then they have, things that we'll look at will be more medical practice kind of related things, but it can be, non-healthcare practice or a
Mhm.
non-hospital entity that may be doing a self-disclosure. Also, I think on pages 3 and 4, they do tell you too in B under 2B is what
Mhm.
conduct is eligible for self-disclosure. And then under C, it tells you what conduct is ineligible for self-disclosure. So then it also goes and tells you if you're doing these kinds of things, this is what fits in this wheelhouse. But if you're doing these kinds of things, then you don't worry about it here. That's not what this is for. So make sure, again, y'all, when you go to look at these things or think that it might be applicable to you, that, you look at those sections to see. Also talks about the statute of limitations in there and things like that. So it's a really good full 15-page document. The important section would be under 3A, gives you the requirements for self-disclosure. That
Mhm.
starts on page 5. There are 11 different requirements, so make sure you look through those. And
Yep.
that's kind of the stuff that you'll get and going to that online submission form.
Exactly.
And by the way, here is the link for the online submission form. So you can
Perfect.
do it right online when you do the stuff and fill out, and they'll ask you to make sure you're the correct party to do it and ask for
Mhm.
tax ID numbers and, things like that. So you have to make sure that you have all the information necessary when you're going in to fill out these forms. And that's where looking at this and seeing what's needed and speaking with a healthcare attorney, can make
Yes.
sure that you have everything when and if you ever have to go to submit something for self-disclosure. They also have stuff in there for false billing, which starts on page 6. So they're talking about when you've had improper claims that have been submitted to the federal health care program, and that you need to like find your estimation of damages and things like that. So there is a lot involved if you're going
There's a
to do
lot.
it.
Mhm. That's exactly what I
Now,
was talking about earlier. It
yeah,
it just really dives into the specifics of how you, as the provider and your team, then you have to provide a sample and the complexities of obtaining a, random, sample that will qualify per OIG
yeah,
standards. It
yeah,
goes into the weeds about all of that, really critical information as well for when you self-disclose.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you further go in and look for the resolution section, which starts on page 11, pages 11 and 12, then it starts talking to you about, cooperating, of course, as they always, say that,
Of
that's
course.
with getting the speedy resolution, it's done,
Mhm.
you're done. That lower multiplier, you
Yes.
don't have to worry about exclusion and civil monetary penalties.
Mhm.
And then you don't get that big kind of releases that like I put out on those Friday fraudsters where they're just
Yes.
listing everything you've ever done and putting every name out there and all that stuff, that they don't do that because you're self-disclosing. And then it talks about how the OIG and the DOJ, coordinate when they're doing these things too. So, you get a lot of brownie points when you have found something and it's money you don't deserve, and you're saying, okay, we found this, and we know we shouldn't have it, so we need to
Mhm.
give it back, so we got a clean slate. So which is where that, I think, that lower multiplier, that's really a
Exactly.
big carrot, right,
Mhm.
to
It
go
really
ahead
is.
and do it.
Exactly right. They do just wag it in front of you, it is a carrot that's just dangling there, that there's lots of benefits to, performing a self-disclosure. They really give you a lot of grace in their opinion, right? They're taking all of these other, um, penalties away if you are
Yeah.
going to be self-disclosing. So that's one way of looking at it, that is a beneficial item. So, yeah. So much detail in these 15 pages, Betty. Um, Lots of really good information. And I like that you emphasize to the audience that when you perform a self disclosure, it's not publicly available. Like all of those details that you and I talk about here on Compliance Capers, our first month of January, we talked about the laundry list of enforcement actions, right?
Hmm.
So when the OIG and the DOJ create those types of documents, you won't see too much information on a self disclosure, like you alluded to earlier, right? It's just going to be about a paragraph, but no real other details are going to be highlighted in a black and white press release type of document, because you simply took all of the evidence and you gave it, appropriately, in good faith to the OIG. So yeah, all of those details won't be made available to all of us. So that's a great, good thing to the practice as well.
Yeah, because if you Google, like the one we're going to bring up here in a minute, if
Yeah,
you go and Google it, the name of the facility, you don't find anything,
you don't.
because
Exactly.
that they're
You
not,
don't.
announcing it out there and saying, hey,
They're
we
not.
got these fraudsters and look what we did to these
No,
people,
no,
because you're disclosing that yourself, and so you don't have all of that stuff going on. So that, I
exactly.
think, is a big deal, because
It's a big
these
deal.
days people Google everything to find out about every
Exactly.
place. If you go to a restaurant, you're going to be Googling it to see what everybody
Right.
says about it.
Right.
So I agree with you. I think that's a really, really big thing for these places, is that it's just nice and quiet because you made a mistake. Nobody's
You
trying
made
to
a
embarrass
mistake.
you.
Exactly. You're not a fraudster, right? You're admitting that you made a mistake, an
Yep.
error. You followed all of their rules that they typed out in these 15 pages, right? You did it all correctly and you gave them all of the information appropriately.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a good thing.
Before we talk about the example that we have for today to get started on our self-disclosure month,
Yeah.
there are another couple links that I just wanted to share with everybody. So this link gives some DOJ self-disclosure policy information. And now this is from the New Hampshire. Is this the one that's from New Hampshire?
New
Yeah, this
Hampshire.
is the New
Hmm.
Hampshire protocol. And so it's just to show you, different states may have different information out there, but you can
That's right.
kind of see, where they talk about what their policies are. So you also
Hmm.
want to check out your state to see if they have anything else that's different.
That's right.
Um, and this is the, 15 page, big giant document that we were looking through. So you want to go in there, and just, this is another great one to bookmark just in case it ever
Hmm.
comes up. You ever have to
Absolutely.
have it, then you're not scrambling going, I know there's something somewhere, and then you can't find where it is. Or, be like me and print it off and have, big folders everywhere.
Yeah, and
hanging
that's
file
great.
folders, you know?
Yeah,
I like
absolutely.
that. I love that touch, you know? And
Exactly.
then again, that online submission form link for you. But we wanted to kind of introduce the whole concept here for the self disclosures with, our first one for our compliance capers in April. And this is from New York Presbyterian Brooklyn Methodist Hospital. So they went and did a self disclosure and ended up paying $17.3 million. So we're not saying that these self disclosures are going to be, $1,000 or something like that. But remember what Sonal said earlier, the 1.5 times multiplier. So imagine that could have been double or
Double,
more
triple,
that they could have
right,
been paying back,
that's right.
so
Mhm.
at that point, that 17.3 probably didn't sound so bad when they came to it. But do you want to describe for everybody what they self-disclosed at the New York Presbyterian Brooklyn Methodist Hospital?
Yes, I would love to. Um, as soon as I pull it up here on my PDF. All right, so for this particular case, let me just read to you a couple of the points from the paragraph. Like we stated earlier, it's not that long, right? But in general, this 17.3 million was to resolve allegations that it paid unlawful kickbacks to their physicians at the hospital's chemotherapy infusion center. The payments were made pursuant to a contractual arrangement that linked the compensation physicians received to the number of referrals the physicians made for services at the center. The agreement also resolves claims that physicians at the infusion center failed to adequately supervise the chemotherapy services. So, I think that's really interesting. These are things that I know you and I have worked on personally in our career when it comes to infusion types of services, who's performing them. These are things that we ask when we are auditing those types of services, right? We want to make sure that, in general, our chemotherapy types of services at infusion center types of places, large cancer hospitals, etc. They have a whole section, a wing for these
Yeah.
types of infusions to take place, right? Who's actually doing that work? Well, in general, we don't have all of the facts here, right? But in general, nurses are the ones who are actually, doing the infusion. They are the ones who are providing that injection therapy for the patient. But according to CMS regulations, right, all of that is wonderful that the nurse is providing that very necessary service. However, those nurses need to be supervised, right? That is according to CMS, right, Betty? And we have a
Yeah.
variety of supervision levels in CMS, et cetera. So, from an auditing standpoint, there's so much that you and I can glean off of just these few sentences that are written out, right? That, this particular system in New York, just weren't following any of these CMS guidelines. And also, what was in their compliance program, right? That's another little tidbit that I hope
Yeah.
after all of this beautiful self disclosure, they've gone back and improved upon what's in their compliance program now in terms of supervision, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the kickback thing, is probably, and again, we're both of us are just kind of giving our opinions, our guesses at what happened. But I'm
Right.
assuming it's probably something to where, since they had no idea, and it was probably in some
Yeah.
manner that nobody thought anything of it. And then
Right.
they probably had some consultants that were in looking at things, and it was like, wait a minute, you do what?
Right.
And
Right.
and so
Mhm.
they just kind of followed along. And with the supervision thing, it's the same kind of thing. I think, there are maybe, a lot of chemo, the same thing would be like with dialysis, it's the same
Mhm.
kind of concept where they usually have them in more off center places or kind of by
Right.
themselves. They want to try to make it nice and quiet and relaxing for the people
Yes.
that are getting the
Yes.
services. They have the loungy kind of chair set up for them.
Mhm. Mhm.
But for chemotherapy administrations, those require direct supervision. And that's the thing with CMS, the services either have the general, which
Mhm.
means that the physician is just responsible for it, but doesn't actually have to be present anywhere. And then they have the direct, which means that they do have to be in the area, in the suite kind of thing, like for incident to services, kind of, think of it
Right.
that way. And then they have the personal, meaning they personally have to do it. And chemo falls under those direct
Direct.
supervision.
Mhm.
So again, I would guess that, somebody was auditing or checking, or they had people come in looking at these things, and somebody just happened to pick up either in the documentation or in questioning them. So where's the physician when these things are going on? And the response that they got back was,
Yeah.
telling that, they were not meeting the supervision requirements. And so, kudos to them for, taking it on,
Mhm.
correcting it,
Mhm.
and moving forward to doing it right. Because, sometimes it might mean that you're just not going to be making the same amount as you were before. Like it's going to wind up not, I mean, regardless of your payback, but I mean, moving forward, you won't
Mhm.
be paid as much anymore because, you didn't do XYZ, or it really was this code and not that code kind of thing. But sometimes it's just that your protocol needs to change. Once you
Yes.
change the protocol, then you're all good and your revenue is going to be the same as it was when you were doing it wrong. It's just now you're doing it compliantly. So it's not always like, oh, this is just going to be a loss to us from here on in, but even if it was, you have to do the right thing. So kudos to them for stepping up and, doing what they needed to do, and, having us kind of guess at
Yeah.
what the reasons are, because they get to keep all of that kind of stuff private. So, but yeah, that one I think was good because we had the kind of the two different little things. And that might also be why they paid back in the amount they paid back. If it was just one of
Yes.
the things
It
by
might
itself,
it would have been less.
it might
Exactly.
not have been at that, at that
Yeah.
amount that they have in there.
Mhm.
But again, we're just supposing.
Mhm. Exactly. And we don't ever like to suppose, but in
No,
these types of cases, that's all we have. We're just giving our, you know,
our
um,
educated
our
suppositions.
educated suppositions based on our experience. Because I know we've worked a lot over these years, with these amazing types of practitioners, right? Because they are doing amazing things for
Yes.
patients who are suffering. So it's a good thing, and I'm very happy that they did come back and self-disclose, um, and hopefully they have taken heed and made these updates into their compliance program. And most importantly, in my opinion, making sure that there is a physician somewhere in the suite when there is that room full of patients who are receiving
Yeah.
chemotherapy infusions.
Yeah.
All of those doctors can't just be off and out of the office um, during those hours of when those
Right.
patients are sitting in those comfortable, beautiful lounge chairs, hopefully looking out at a beautiful view, and receiving their treatment in a calm, space. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. They could be, like down here, I'm looking out my lanai sliders at my palm trees and the canal and the
Yes,
boat. Kind of makes it a little bit easier to take when you have some stuff going on. But yeah,
exactly.
so this is a good one. So it's a nice, easy step into our self-disclosure month. And we will be taking a look at the next compliance capers at one that deals with incident to services. So that's
That's
another one
right.
that we constantly have coming up
Mhm.
everywhere when we're talking to practices. So that'll be a good one to talk about too. So thanks everybody for joining us today for this episode of Compliance Capers, for our first one in April on self-disclosures. And we will see y'all next Friday morning at 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right?
Wonderful, Betty. Thank you so much. Yeah, I hope everybody in the audience learned a lot today about our first episode on the background of self-disclosure protocols and learned something new from this particular case in New York. So thank you so much, my friend. I can't wait to hear about what we're talking about next week. I'm excited.
I know it's so good to have you on here doing these together. It's a lot of fun.
Yes,
So,
so much fun.
um, yes, we appreciate everybody that's listening into and asking us questions,
Yes,
and we're just really excited to be doing these. So, thanks, and have a good Friday, and we will see you on the next Compliance Capers. Bye,
that's
y'all.
right. Bye-bye.